Good morning and welcome to another episode of Happy Melly Coffee. We're joined today with Jurgen and Ian. Where are you from?
Sweden. Well, I'm originally from Romania.
Nice.
I've been living for the last 15 years in Sweden.
And Ryan, I recognize you.
Yes.
Where are you calling from today?
I'm from beautiful Center City, Philadelphia.
Awesome. Glad you can all join us. So we have a question that was posted a while back by Gupret, who can't join us today. So I'm going to read it aloud. His question is, how can we convince management to think beyond earning profits in the short term and to build on the employees for long-term profitability horizons?
It's a fascinating question. The first time I read the question, to be honest, I thought, okay, here we go again. It is the same thing coming up all the time. It's how to convince other people to change their behaviors. This question exists in like a million varieties. How to convince other people that we are right and they are wrong. And I thought, I don't want to have that discussion again. But then that was the first part of the question. And the second part that stood out to me suddenly was thinking beyond earning profits in the short term and building on the employees for long-term profitability. And that's something that I have rarely talked about, actually. And that gives the question a lot more focus. It's not just about convincing anyone to change any behavior. And this is specifically about changing what companies are doing in terms of what is the purpose of the business, basically. Are we making money here or are we doing something else? And there's a famous quote, I believe it is from Peter Drucker, who said that aiming for profits for an organization, it's like breathing air for human beings. It is not the purpose to breathe air. It is something else. Of course, we need air to breathe. Of course, companies need profits, making money in order to do their thing, but it's not the goal. And that sort of conflicted with the famous idea of shareholder value advocated by Milton Friedman and others, particularly in the US. Neoliberal thinking, it is called nowadays in some part of the world, where the purpose of the business is just to make a shitload of money for their shareholders. And then everything should turn out right for everyone. This has sort of been discredited by now, this concept. So who has any thoughts about this matter? I'm curious. Ian or Ryan or Andy?
So one thing that I tend to focus on more recently is just, first of all, executives know one language, and it's typically the language of money. So removing the conversation of ROI or profits or revenue away from the conversation is probably going to be a losing battle. But what we can do is understand that and change the context of the conversation so that while still having the speaking to the overall engagement and the happiness of the employee, while framing it in the executive speak, is probably the best leverage that we have. So, for example, I talk about employee engagement quite often in my organization. Very large, Jurgen, Dutch-based company. So, lots of orange. But we have the conversation about attrition quite often, right? The more engaged an employee is, the more happy an employee is, the less of a flight risk they become. And then the way that translates into dollars is there's a lot of cost, both real dollars and opportunity cost associated with recruiting, onboarding, and spinning up a backfill position. And then there's also the emotional cost that takes, in the world of Agile, on like a team. So for that person to come in, disrupt the existing flow of the team and become ingratiated into that, become returning to a high performing state, has real impact on cost. So getting people to think about the overall cost of attrition, not just, hey, we're going to lose this $100,000 employee, we're going to bring in $90,000 employee. Good, we saved 10 grand. It doesn't work like that, right? There's a whole lot of additional value that gets lost and is missed well beyond that $10,000. So starting the conversation there, let's make these guys happy to make them less of a flight risk. Let's give them an opportunity to be more innovative and more engaged at work, so that they stay focused. And there is something to be, I mean, I work in software, right? So happier developers write less bugs. It's not just a saying, it's a real thing. So I think trying to connect the dots between happiness and value to the executives is really where the conversation begins.
I agree. I had a very similar conversation just last week at an event in Hamburg, Germany, where we noted that it is similar to the pursuit of happiness, for example, where you do not achieve happiness when you're trying to aim for it directly, because that doesn't work. Well, you can have short-term happiness. You just throw a party, but it will be over, and you'll have a hangover the next Monday morning, which is not a very happy moment for some. But if you're aiming for long-term happiness, then it's not the happiness itself you should be trying to achieve. You should be doing other things like exercising or meditating or hanging out with friends or whatever. I have the 12 steps to happiness that I offer as a poster and as part of my new book, hint, new book coming out very soon. And this is the same with companies and their purpose, as some have noted. There's actual research confirming this. I saw it in either Forbes or Harvard Business Review, where they actually researched the companies that do not aim for profit are the ones more profitable. And indeed, I agree with Ryan that this is the kind of language probably that we should be using. Like, if you want the long-term profitability, stop focusing on it in the short term. But then you're still phrasing it in the language, indeed, of the target audience, which is top management, because ultimately it will be about the dollars or euros or whatever. So, agreed.
Yeah, I love how you framed it. And I don't know if you do this intentionally when you talked about your Dutch origins being orange thinking, but that also corresponds with that Laloux's and Wilbur's, orange mentality, where the drivers are wealth and profit and measurable accounting. Right. And I also like that you see that you have to frame the conversation with that in mind. And like you said, Jurgen, in the language that your audience speaks, because you're not going to change them. Right. But if you can frame it as turnover is expensive. Why do people leave? Because they're not happy. So how do we create a system that encourages happiness over unhappiness?
It is something that I mention frequently in my talks, that once I introduced agile practices and agile thinking in the company where I worked many years ago, turnover dropped from I don't know, 17% to nearly zero. And you can simply calculate, indeed, the costs per year of or the value of attrition or the cost of turnover. And that, not only that, but also as some companies experience in Silicon Valley and other competitive environments, it is a race to the bottom if you're just trying to hire people by offering more money than the company next door. If that is all you have to offer, if everything is about the money, it's, as I said, it's a race to the bottom. You can't win it, ultimately. But if you offer something more, an inspiring purpose, a great working environment, and so forth, etc. Sorry, switching to Dutch here, a little tired. Then it should be possible to not pay people the highest salaries in the industry. I'm not paying. Don't tell anyone. Annie knows it. I'm not paying my Happy Melly team members the highest fees in the industry. I don't. And they're still happy. And you can also calculate that, what you can win in terms of compensation by offering something else, which is much cheaper, which is having great friends to hang out with, and the fun environment and stuff like that. And that ultimately you can calculate that as well. Not the best thing to communicate to other audiences, but with this audience, I'm sure that can resonate.
Yeah, I'll trip right down the rabbit hole that you opened up there, Jurgen. I got to be careful because I am on the floor, so I don't want to say too much. But on my team, we've had 4 hires in the last 12 months that actually took pay cuts to come work here. And we do measure engagement, we do measure happiness, we do measure wellness and things of that nature. And my team's across the entire business unit, my team is one of the highest. We were the highest until a couple days ago and somebody overtook us, but I'd love to fight for the top engagement ranking. But yeah, so it is true. I mean, especially in the creative thinking industry, most of these people realize they can get a job anywhere. Why not work somewhere that makes them happy? So I love it. And I think one thing that's interesting is across the industry, there's starting to become that shift from looking at resources as headcount, right? That we've commoditized people in the world of software, specifically in technology. I think it's Simon Sinek that said that we need to shift the thinking of people as headcount and more as heartbeats, because when you think of them as heartbeats, you humanize the idea of resources, and it allows for you to actually create plans and paths and engaging environments for these people to evolve and to, again, maintain that degree of engagement so that they're sticking around and there is real value to that.
So do you frame that conversation again in orange thinking? You know, where at the worst, the company's a profit engine and the people are the cogs, right? In really limited, old school thinking. So how do we frame the conversation that people are heartbeats? I'm curious how you've succeeded.
Well, you're assuming I've succeeded, sir. No, I think honestly, and just because he's on the line doesn't mean this is why I'm saying this. I like to apply a lot of the workout exercises. I know, Andy, you and I had lunch. Was it this week? My God, it feels like it was long ago, but it was this week. And we talked about the use of personal maps and just showing that you give a damn, right? You're willing to learn about these people and you're willing to learn about the intrinsic motivators that drive them and what makes them happy. And I think because a lot of what Jurgen and thought leaders like this come up with are very visual in nature. We visualize happiness. We visualize these relationships and these motivators. We work, a lot of us work in open environments. These executives have to walk past my happiness wall. They have to walk past my improvement boards. They have to walk past my personal maps and stuff. So eventually they start getting curious and asking what the hell all this craziness is. And, starting the interest, begets the conversation. The conversation begets the change. So I'm going more grassroots, like ground up. I imagine there's a conversation to be had about the opposite, right? Just going straight to the heart and then working top down. But I'm just a small cog in that large machine, as you put it.
I wonder though how you measure the heartbeats on the team instead of the head count. That's I have been in some environments where that would have been tricky because you put 2 people together, then the heartbeats would be going up.
Yeah, is that a tool question or is that a
No, I'm just kidding here.
Well, no, because there is. I mean, we do measure that, like not heartbeat. Like we don't have people walking around with Fitbits and feeding into Big Brother, but we, at least the folks that I have impact on, we do care about, like, are we? It goes so far as to, you talked about meditation and alone time. We ask them when we bring in lunches, are we giving you healthy enough options? We ask them. It went so far as to swap out some chairs with the yoga ball chairs so people could work on their posture. So, and the way that we get that is we allow the conversation to happen. We want to make sure that there's a safe forum to have the discussion about things that will improve your work life, so that your work itself improves, which then does to have that return on investment. In the creative thinker, the creative worker space, we're not cheap people for the most part, unless you work for Happy Melly, apparently. No, honestly, we're not cheap people. So why not maximize the effectiveness of the resources you're paying top dollar for?
Yeah, agreed. What about Egon? I haven't heard you guys. So what are your thoughts on this?
I sort of, I'm still trying to find my way back to the original question, which is, well, not the part with convincing people, because of course you can't ultimately convince others to change their behavior. But still, I think, or I tend to understand the question in the frame, well, all these things that we discussed, these are good things for whoever is working for the company. And there's a glass ceiling to go through sometimes. The bigger the company, the thicker it is. These things are easy to do, and the executives, of course, are forced to walk by your happiness visualization if you're in a small company. But what about large companies? What about executives who really don't care about these things? So I was sort of spinning around towards that. That's why I'm not saying anything. I can't do two things at the same time. Think and talk is too much.
Okay, I understand your concern. I've been at some companies that were so big, they were practically countries. Indeed, for many people in those organizations, they have never even met the CEO in real life. So how can you possibly convince such a person to change the way that they lead the organization? I'm thinking of the likes of Volkswagen, for example, famous for its mistakes that it made in the last couple of years. I'm sure there have been people at Volkswagen who thought we should be changing the way we operate here. But yeah, how does someone like that reach out to the top management? I totally understand. I don't have the answer to that. I'm just acknowledging that you can only do so much. You have your span of control, your span of influence that is slightly larger or significantly larger for some. And then there's a huge area out there that you cannot even influence. And sometimes top management is in that part, I'm sure. Yeah. But then work with what you have, and hopefully it rolls over to the next layers upwards. And that will be my suggestion.
Yeah, I mean, it's fairly obvious. The larger the company, the larger the curve is to the change. But every not revolutionary, but every new layer of thinking starts with something, right? I mean, even I'm U.S. based, so a lot of my analogies are probably going to be U.S. based. But even the civil rights movement didn't start with an overarching plan to disrupt the way that people think. It started small. In very different pockets. So your range of influence is what it is, but every time you convert, you have a larger range of influence, and it scales. It's a good pyramid scheme.
That's a great analogy, Ryan. It's every change in the way societies work that started with someone who stood up for something and got noticed by others who were more influential, and then they started doing things, and ultimately it percolated upwards to the people who really could make decisions. But that sometimes takes decades. But overall there is progress, as we have seen on a global scale. It just takes a while. We are also very impatient people, I think, sometimes. I literally get the question at such organizations, how long is the transformation going to take here? Well, 10 times longer than you're thinking now.
The interesting thing, I recently gave a talk on transformations, and the idea that a transformation has an endpoint is an interesting concept to even wrap your head around. I believe you transform every day, and if you're not, you're dying. So it's a weird way of you can tell there's probably some Gartner research out there that tells you how long a transformation takes, because an executive read that one time. But
that's true. But I came up with an interesting metaphor. I still need to write about this, but I can share it with you already for the people who are watching this video. I was at Deutsche Bahn, which is one of those big organizations. There are 300,000 people in and around Germany. That's big. And one of them asked, so what is it with change? Is the one-time thing indeed this transformation, or does it never stop? Because the experts seem to disagree. And then for some reason, probably because I was at a railroad company, a railroad metaphor popped up in my mind. And I said, it's like two different things that are being confused, I think. You have this organization that is on an old track and it goes straight and it has a dead end. And it looks very safe. There's not much happening on that track, but you need to get off that track. You need to be on another track, which is more exciting. It's actually a roller coaster, actually, the other track. And it changes all the time, and it's very exciting, very, 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 very dynamic. And that track, indeed, it always changes. So there are two different things. One is getting that train onto the other track. That is the transformation that I would refer to change from an organization that is one that is able to continuously adapt. And then once you're able to do that, well, enjoy the roller coaster.
I'm getting this idea that well, continuous improvement and continuous change in the good pyramid type of way, as Ryan was saying, and as you, Jurgen, are saying. I mean, that sort of continuous change towards the better, towards the good, that requires, I think, some groundwork of trust. And that's, again, I think, back to the original question of, how do you convince an organization to change something? Well, it requires some trust, right? As part of the culture of that company.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise, how would it, you can't improve unless you, reflect and retrospect and look at where you've arrived on those moving tracks. And then you have to be honest enough and to be able to say, well, we're not in the right place. Let's learn something from it and change. And that requires trust in itself. So I just got this idea that all these things we're talking about require some sort of trust in as a base for the company. If that's not there, then none of everything else is like a castle built on sand.
True, and this is a topic that has emerged at an earlier Happy Melly coffee as well. I keep insisting with everyone that the trust, and now we come sort of back a full circle, start with speaking the language of the people that you're trying to get the trust of. Like I was trusted by my CEO back then because I think I was able to speak his language. I was able to talk debit, credit, return on investment, balance sheets, and all that stuff. I had no difficulty switching language between the geeks and top management, and that gave me trust. Also, delivering on commitment is something that is very, very important. You cannot just ask people for one favor after the other, and we want to change this and we want to do that. Why don't you start first by offering what they want? Offering what the top management want. Even if you don't agree with all of it, you just do what you're asked, and then within reasonable bounds, of course. And it will be annoying every now and then, but at least it will gain you the trust of being a reliable employee. And then once you're at that level of being trusted by someone, you can say, well, the way we've been doing things around here, I would like to run some experiments of doing something a bit different. Oh, okay, sure. Well, go ahead. I was at that level after a little while, but you don't achieve that if you don't speak the language and if you do not deliver on commitment. So that is often forgotten, I think, by some more radical people who are very insistent on their practices and the changes and transformations, and they never gain the trust of the ones who really matter, which is indeed those at the top. They make the final decisions ultimately for making that happen or giving space to those experiments. All right. Anyone else on wise words? All right. Well, I think then we can wrap it up.
Yeah. thank you guys for joining us today, and thanks to our audience for watching us. And we'll see you around the neighborhood.
I
Thanks.
look forward to the next
Nice.
conversation. Thank you, Ian. Thanks, Ryan, for your contributions.